The void between stars holds many secrets, but none more dangerous than the ones we create ourselves. When humanity reached for the cosmos, we brought our greatest gift and our darkest curse with us, the power to choose between compassion and profit. This is the story of one man who thought he'd lost that choice forever, until the universe sent him a reminder that some decisions echo across species and time itself. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Part 1. Marcus Chun's hands moved with practiced efficiency across the cutting torch controls, the blue plasma flame dancing against the twisted metal hull of what used to be the merchant vessel Lucky Strike. 3 months dead in the asteroid belt, picked clean by pirates, abandoned by insurance adjusters who wrote it off as another casualty of the expansion war's lingering chaos. Now it was just premium salvage floating in the dark, waiting for someone desperate enough to claim it. That someone was Marcus, and desperate didn't begin to cover it. The rust bucket, his modified cargo hauler, hung motionless against the backdrop of Ceres' distant glow, its cargo bay already half filled with extracted components. Titanium plating, quantum cores, anything that could fetch enough credits to keep him flying for another month. It wasn't glamorous work, but it kept him moving, kept him alone, and most importantly, kept him from thinking too hard about the voices he used to hear over the comm channels. Engineering to bridge, we've got a problem down here. His own voice echoed in his memory, young and confident, reporting to Captain Torres 3 years ago aboard the CFA Meridian. Back when he believed that following orders meant doing the right thing. Back when he thought the Colonial Fleet Authority stood for something noble. Marcus killed the torch and let the memory fade like it always did, bitter and sharp-edged. The silence of the asteroid belt pressed against his helmet, broken only by his own breathing and the occasional ping of debris against distant rocks. It was better this way, safer. No crew to lose, no orders to follow, no innocent civilians caught in the crossfire of someone else's war. The Lucky Strike's cargo manifest flickered across his visor display, and he allowed himself a thin smile. Medical supplies mostly. Expired now, worthless to the colonies, but still containing rare earth metals in their synthetic components. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was dismantling medicine to pay for fuel. Everything useful got stripped, down to its base elements out here, including people. A proximity alert chimed in his earpiece, and Marcus glanced at his scanner. Another ship, running silent, drifting in from the belt's outer edge. Pirates, most likely, coming to claim salvage rights that didn't exist in the lawless zones between Colonial Authority and the Outer Rim Collective. He'd dealt with their type before. Show enough firepower, act unpredictable enough, and they usually moved on to easier targets. But this signature was wrong. Too small for a raider, too quiet for a merchant. And it was broadcasting something. That made his blood run cold. A Colonial Fleet Authority distress beacon, weak and intermittent, like a dying heartbeat. Marcus sealed his cutting equipment and pushed off from the Lucky Strike's hull, using his suit thrusters to drift back toward the rust bucket. His ship's sensors were military surplus, better than anything most salvagers could afford, a reminder of his former life that he couldn't quite bring himself to replace. The readings made no sense. The beacon was authentic, but the ship transmitting. It wasn't in any database. No registry, no identification, just a faint energy signature that seemed to pulse with something almost organic. 3 years of running solo had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now they were screaming at him to fire up the pulse drive and put as much distance as possible between himself and whatever was floating out there in the dark. Colonial Fleet beacons meant investigations, reports, questions about why a disgraced former engineer was operating in restricted salvage zones. It meant contact with the organization that had branded him a liability and cut him loose after the Meridian incident. But it also meant someone might be dying out there, alone in the cold between worlds, just like he'd been dying slowly for the past 3 years. Marcus sealed himself into the Rust Bucket's airlock and ran through the pre-flight sequence, muscle memory guiding his hands while his mind wrestled with a choice he thought he'd stopped making. The safe play was obvious. Log the beacon, report it to the nearest colonial outpost, and let someone else deal with whatever complications came crawling out of the void. He'd learned that lesson the hard way when good intentions got his entire crew killed. The ship's engines hummed to life, and the asteroid field began to shift as he brought the Rust Bucket around toward the mystery signal. His hands shook slightly as he engaged the forward thrusters, and he told himself it was just a recycled air mixture running a little cold. Not fear, not hope, certainly not the ghost of the man he used to be before he learned that heroism was just another word for spectacular failure. The beacon grew stronger as he approached, and with it came the certainty that whatever he found out here would change everything. Again, the distress signal led Marcus through a maze of drifting rock and metal debris, each ping on his scanner, drawing him deeper into a section of the asteroid belt that his navigation charts marked as unexplored. The beacon's transmission grew clearer with proximity, revealing layers of encryption that made his salvage computer work overtime to decode. What finally emerged from the static wasn't a standard Colonial Fleet emergency broadcast. It was a voice, female and desperate, speaking in perfect standard English, punctuated by bursts of something that sounded like crystalline wind chimes. The words made his heart race, even as his rational mind cataloged all the reasons this had to be some kind of trap. Emergency Protocol 77 Alpha. Life support failing. Cognitive matrix degrading. Please respond. Please respond. I don't want to fade like the others. Marcus had heard plenty of distress calls during his years with the fleet, but nothing that carried this particular quality of exhaustion mixed with terror. Whoever was transmitting sounded like they'd been screaming into the void for days, watching death approach with mathematical certainty. The kind of fear that came not from sudden disaster, but from slow, inevitable dissolution. His fingers hovered over the communication controls. Standard salvage protocol was clear about responding to emergency beacons, but 3 years of operating alone had taught him that protocols were written by people who never had to explain why they'd risk their lives for strangers. Still, something about the voice's cadence reminded him of his sister Lisa, the way she used to sound when nightmares woke her as a child. Unknown vessel, this is salvage operator Rust Bucket responding to your distress call. What is your situation? Silence stretched across the comm channel for several heartbeats before the voice returned, now carrying a note of disbelief that struck him as painfully genuine. You can hear me? You're real? Not another echo from the degradation cycles? I'm real. What's your location and status? The coordinates that followed led him to a section of space that looked empty on every sensor except one. His military-grade energy detector picked up something extraordinary hiding in the shadow of a massive metallic asteroid, its power signature unlike anything in his database. As the Rust Bucket rounded the rock's curve, Marcus found himself staring at what appeared to be a small escape pod constructed from materials that seemed to bend light around their edges. The craft was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Directly, its hull appearing to be grown rather than manufactured. Organic curves flowed seamlessly into geometric patterns that sparked with their own internal illumination, creating the impression of frozen lightning trapped in crystalline amber. It was clearly alien technology, but not from any species humanity had encountered during the expansion wars. How long have you been drifting out here? Marcus asked, running every scan his ship could manage while keeping a safe distance. Time becomes fluid when your energy matrix starts breaking down. Days, maybe weeks. The containment field is failing, and I can feel myself beginning to scatter. My people, we don't die the way yours do. We just dissolve back into component frequencies. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. The pod's energy readings were definitely declining, showing the kind of power curve associated with critical system failure. Whatever was keeping this being alive was running on borrowed time, but every instinct honed by 3 years of survival. In the lawless zones screamed warnings about alien contact protocols and the kind of trouble that followed anyone who got involved with non-human refugees. What happened to your ship? How did you end up alone out here? The pause that followed stretched long enough for Marcus to wonder if the transmission had cut out. When the voice returned, it carried weight that suggested terrible memories. They took us from our homeworld under the pretense of cultural exchange. Scientists, they called themselves. Representatives of something called Titan Industries. They wanted to study how we interface with technology, how our consciousness can flow between different matrix systems. What they really wanted was to weaponize us. Marcus's hands tightened on the controls. Titan Industries was one of the mega corporations that had profited enormously from the expansion wars, specializing in alien technology integration and what their marketing department euphemistically called xenobiological applications. They operated in the gray areas between colonial law and corporate sovereignty, the kind of organization that made moral compromises look like business strategies. I managed to escape when their containment system suffered a cascade failure. Others tried to follow, but the security protocols. The voice broke, and the crystalline harmonics that accompanied it shifted into something that sounded unmistakably like grief. I'm the only one who made it to an escape matrix. The only one left. Marcus found himself studying the alien craft with new eyes, noting details that suggested hasty construction and emergency modifications. Scorch marks along what might have been access panels. Irregular energy flows that spoke of jury-rigged systems, pushed beyond their design limits. This wasn't a planned departure. This was a desperate flight from something horrible. "What's your name?" he asked, surprised by the gentleness in his own voice. "I am called Vera. In your language, it approximates the concept of truth keeper or memory holder. What should I call you? Human who answers distress calls in the deep places." "Marcus. And I'm going to get you out of there." The words left his mouth before his rational mind could stop them, carrying 3 years of suppressed guilt and the ghost of the man who used to believe in doing the right thing regardless of consequences. He'd sworn off heroics after the Meridian incident, promised himself that his days of risking everything for strangers were finished. But something about Vera's situation resonated with his own exile, the loneliness of drifting between worlds with nowhere safe to land. "Marcus." She repeated his name like she was tasting the sound. "I must warn you that helping me will bring danger to your life. Titan Industries does not abandon valuable assets, and they have resources throughout this sector. They will hunt us both." Marcus looked at his scanner readings, calculating fuel reserves and the distance to the nearest safe harbor. Every rational part of his mind enumerated the risks, the complications, the ways this decision would probably end with both of them dead in the void. But for the first time in 3 years, the voices of his lost crew weren't whispering accusations. In his memory, "Let me worry about Titan Industries," he said, bringing the rust bucket alongside the failing pod. "Right now, let's focus on keeping you from dissolving into cosmic background radiation." The rescue process proved more complex than Marcus had anticipated. Vera's escape pod operated on principles that defied everything he knew about spacecraft. Engineering, its crystalline hull responding to his docking clamps like living tissue recoiling from cold metal. The energy readings fluctuated wildly whenever the rust bucket systems made contact, creating feedback loops that threatened to overload both vessels. "Your ship's electromagnetic field is interfering with my matrix stability," Vera explained through the comm channel, her voice now carrying undertones of strain. "I need to transfer to a more compatible environment before complete dissolution occurs." Marcus studied his cargo bay through the internal cameras, mentally cataloging everything that might serve as a temporary habitat for a being made of crystallized energy. The bay held mostly salvaged components and spare parts, but tucked in one corner sat his pride and joy, a fully functional quantum computer core he'd rescued from a derelict research vessel 6 months ago. The processing matrix was military grade, designed to handle complex calculations for jump navigation and tactical analysis. "I've got a quantum core in my cargo bay," he offered. "Military spec, full isolation protocols. Would that work as temporary housing?" The harmonics in Vera's voice shifted to something that might have been relief mixed with amazement. "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." "A quantum matrix? Yes, that would be perfect. But Marcus, you must understand what you're offering. When I interface with your systems, there will be a connection between us. I'll be able to access your ship's databases, communication logs, even personal files. There will be no privacy, no secrets." Marcus considered this revelation while running pre-transfer diagnostics on the cargo bay's atmospheric controls. Privacy had been a luxury he'd given up the day he started talking to the ghosts of his dead crew. If anything, having another consciousness aboard might finally quiet the voices that had been his only companions for 3 years. "I've got nothing worth hiding," he said, surprised to realize he meant it. "And you're running out of time." The transfer process required Marcus to manually reconfigure the quantum core's housing, creating a direct interface port that would allow Vera's consciousness to flow from her failing pod into the more stable computing environment. Working in the cargo bay's zero gravity, he found himself moving with a precision and purpose he hadn't felt since his fleet engineering days. Each connection had to be perfect, each pathway carefully aligned to prevent the kind of catastrophic system feedback that could kill them both. Vera guided him through the procedure with instructions that revealed an intimate understanding of human technology despite her alien origins. She knew the voltage requirements for quantum field generators, the optimal frequencies for consciousness transfer protocols, even the specific safety margins built into Colonial Fleet computer cores. Her knowledge suggested either extensive study of human systems or direct experience working with them. "Initiate the transfer matrix in 3 seconds, Vera instructed. "I'll need to compress my full consciousness into a data stream that your core can accommodate. There may be some initial instability as I adapt to the new environment." Marcus's finger hovered over the activation switch, suddenly aware that he was about to invite an alien intelligence into the most sophisticated computer system aboard his ship. The rational part of his mind screamed warnings about hostile takeovers, consciousness viruses, and all the ways this could end with him dead or worse. But Vera's voice carried none of the cold calculation he'd expect from a digital predator. Instead, he heard exhaustion, hope, and something unmistakably vulnerable. "Transfer initiated," he announced, engaging the quantum interface. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Light erupted from the quantum core's housing, not the harsh illumination of electronics, but something warm and organic that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. The entire cargo bay filled with shifting patterns of energy that reminded Marcus of Aurora, displays on atmosphere-bearing worlds, beautiful and alien and utterly alive. And the real surprise hit him. As Vera's consciousness settled into the quantum matrix, Marcus felt an echo of her presence in his own mind. Not invasive or controlling, but like a distant conversation in another room, just audible enough to know someone else was there. Through their connection, he caught fragments of her thoughts and memories, vast crystal cities floating in space, beings of pure energy dancing between stars, and then darkness, laboratories, the screams of her people as they were torn apart. "For study." "I'm sorry." Vera's voice now came from the ship's speakers, richer and more nuanced than the radio transmissions. "I didn't intend for you to experience those memories." The connection is stronger than I expected. Marcus steadied himself against the cargo bay wall, his mind still processing the emotional residue of experiences that belonged to someone else entirely. The pain he'd felt through their link was profound, but it carried a quality he recognized from his own nightmares. Survivor's guilt. The weight of being the only one who escaped when others couldn't. "We've both lost people," he said quietly. "Maybe that's why we found each other." The lights in the cargo bay dimmed and shifted, creating patterns that somehow conveyed contemplation. "Your crew. I can see fragments of what happened through our connection. You blame yourself for following orders that led to their deaths." Marcus nodded, unsurprised that she could access those memories. The Meridian incident had played in his head so many times that it probably occupied more mental storage than anything else in his life. "I was supposed to be their engineer, their problem solver. When the situation went wrong, I couldn't fix it. Couldn't save them. You were one person trying to prevent a catastrophe created by systems much larger than yourself," Vera replied, her voice carrying a warmth that he hadn't heard directed at him in years. "Just as I was one consciousness trying to save my people from those who saw us only as resources to be exploited." The quantum core's housing stabilized, its energy patterns settling into a steady rhythm that somehow felt like contentment. Through their connection, Marcus sensed Vera exploring the ship's systems with careful curiosity, familiarizing herself with everything from life support to navigation controls. It should have felt like an invasion, but instead it reminded him of having a co-pilot again, someone who understood the intricate dance required to keep a spacecraft functioning in the hostile environment of space. "I can optimize your engine efficiency by 12%, Vera offered. "Your plasma injectors are running slightly out of phase, and the quantum field generators could benefit from harmonic tuning. If you'd like, I could also upgrade your sensor array to detect energy signatures that most human technology misses." Marcus found himself smiling for the first time in months. Partners? The lights in the cargo bay pulsed once, bright and warm. Partners. Over the following days, Marcus discovered that having Vera aboard was like upgrading every system on his ship while gaining the most sophisticated conversation partner in known space. She integrated herself into the Rust Bucket's operations with a delicacy that spoke of deep respect for both the machinery and its human operator. Rather than simply taking control, she offered suggestions, requested permission, and always left him with the final decision on any modifications. The improvements began subtly. The recycling system started running more efficiently, extracting additional nutrients from food stores and producing cleaner water than the original specifications promised. The power distribution network optimized itself, reducing energy waste by routing electricity through pathways that minimized resistance and heat generation. Even the artificial gravity felt more stable, no longer producing the slight fluctuations that had been Marcus's constant companion for 3 years of solo operation. "Your ship has excellent bones," Vera observed through the speakers as Marcus ran diagnostics on the newly optimized systems. Whoever designed the original configuration understood the principles of sustainable deep space operation. "The modifications I'm detecting suggest you've made thoughtful improvements over time." Marcus felt an unexpected flush of pride at the compliment. The Rust Bucket had indeed been his project for years, each upgrade carefully chosen and personally installed during long stretches between salvage runs. She was a standard cargo hauler when I bought her from Fleet Surplus. Pretty much everything interesting has been added since then. The quantum computer housing you created for me shows remarkable craftsmanship. The shielding is perfectly calibrated, and the interface pathways demonstrate an intuitive understanding of energy flow principles. Where did you learn such precise engineering techniques? The question brought memories Marcus usually kept locked away, surfacing with unexpected clarity. Colonial Fleet Academy, then 3 years aboard the CFA Meridian as chief engineer. We specialized in deep space reconnaissance, which meant maintaining complex systems with limited resources and no access to supply depots. You learn to make everything count when the nearest repair facility is 6 months away. Vera's presence in the ship's systems shifted, taking on qualities that felt like gentle curiosity. The Meridian. I've accessed fragments of news reports about that vessel through your communication logs. A diplomatic mission that ended in tragedy. Marcus's hands stilled on the diagnostic console. He'd never spoken aloud about what happened aboard the Meridian. Not to investigators, not to therapists, not even to himself during the long nights when sleep refused to come. The official reports classified most details, leaving only sanitized summaries that turned human catastrophe into bureaucratic footnotes. We were supposed to facilitate first contact with the species called the Kethmori, he said, the words feeling strange in his mouth after 3 years of silence. They'd been sending peaceful overtures through intermediary species, expressing interest in trade agreements and cultural exchange. Command thought it would be a simple diplomatic handshake, proof that humanity could build alliances instead of just fighting wars. The ship's lighting dimmed slightly, creating an atmosphere that somehow felt more conducive to difficult conversations. But something went wrong. Everything went wrong. The Kethmori delegation arrived as scheduled, but they brought guests. Representatives from Titan Industries who claimed to be official cultural liaisons. I didn't know then that they'd been monitoring the diplomatic channels, positioning themselves to exploit any new contact for commercial advantage. Marcus moved away from the console, pacing the small confines of the Rust Bucket's main cabin, while memories he'd tried to bury played out with painful clarity. The Kethmori were energy-based beings, similar to your people in some ways. They could interface with technology, share consciousness through direct contact, communicate through harmonic frequencies. Titan Industries saw military applications immediately. Through their mental connection, Marcus felt Vera's growing horror as she began to understand where the story was leading. Her own memories of Titan Industries' methods provided context. That made his account even more disturbing. Captain Torres received new orders 3 days into the cultural exchange. Sealed instructions from Colonial Command that authorized Titan Industries to conduct preliminary compatibility studies with our guests. The company representatives had equipment ready, containment protocols, even modified cargo bays designed to house energy-based life forms. They'd planned the whole thing. You tried to stop them, Vera said, her voice carrying absolute certainty. I was the chief engineer. When they started modifying my ship to serve as a mobile laboratory, I raised objections through proper channels. Filed reports about safety violations, unauthorized equipment installations, potential harm to our guests. Torres told me to follow orders and trust that Command knew what they were doing. Marcus paused at the observation port, staring out at the asteroid field that had become his refuge from a universe that seemed determined to turn every good intention into a weapon. The Kethmori delegation realized what was happening when the containment fields activated. They didn't resist violently, didn't try to damage the ship or harm the crew. They just pleaded for understanding, tried to explain that forced consciousness extraction would destroy their essential nature. They begged us to remember that they'd come in peace. The quantum core's energy patterns fluctuated with what felt like profound sadness, but the orders stood. The orders stood. When I refused to assist with the extraction procedures, Torres confined me to quarters for insubordination. I could hear everything through the comm system. The Kethmori voices changing from confusion to terror to something that wasn't quite screaming, because they communicated through frequencies our ears couldn't process. The sound their consciousness made when it was ripped apart for analysis. Marcus pressed his forehead against the cool metal of the observation port, watching distant stars that seemed indifferent to the suffering that played out in the spaces between them. The extraction process destabilized something fundamental in their life matrix. What Titan Industries pulled from them wasn't consciousness or memory or whatever they were hoping to weaponize. It was just energy discharge, like static electricity from a synthetic fabric. The Kethmori delegation died one by one, and their deaths created a feedback pulse that killed half my crew, including people you cared about. My best friend since academy training. A young technician who'd just gotten engaged. The ship's medic who used to tell jokes during the night watch to keep everyone's spirits up. 12 good people who trusted their officers to make decisions that wouldn't get them killed for corporate profit. The silence that followed stretched long enough for Marcus to wonder if he'd overwhelmed Vera with the weight of his guilt and anger. When she finally spoke, her voice carried warmth that seemed to envelope him like a physical embrace. You survived because someone needed to remember what really happened. Someone needed to carry the truth about their deaths to ensure that their sacrifice meant something beyond corporate advancement. That's a burden, but it's also a purpose. Marcus felt something inside his chest loosen, a knot of self-recrimination that had been tightening for 3 years. I've spent all this time thinking I should have done more, fought harder, found some way to save them. And I've spent months believing I should have warned my people sooner, convinced them that the humans offering cultural exchange were actually planning to dissect our consciousness for profit. We both carry guilt that belongs to the systems that created these tragedies, not to the individuals who tried to prevent them. Through their connection, Marcus felt an echo of understanding that went deeper than words. Vera's memories of her own people's deaths resonated with his experience aboard the Meridian, creating a shared foundation of loss and determination that somehow felt stronger than either of their individual pain. Maybe that's why we found each other, Vera continued. 2 survivors who understand the cost of corporate ambition and the weight of being the only witnesses left to testify about what really happened. Marcus nodded, feeling more centered than he had in years. Partners against the kind of people who turn first contact into weapons development. The ship's lights pulsed once in agreement, and for the first time since the Meridian incident, Marcus felt like he wasn't carrying his burden alone. Their partnership might have continued peacefully through the Outer Rim territories if Vera hadn't detected the scanning pulse 3 days later. Marcus was running routine maintenance on the ship's hull sensors when her voice cut through the comm system with an urgency that made his blood freeze. Marcus, we have multiple contacts approaching. Titan Industries signatures, but they're not broadcasting standard corporate identification codes. These ships are running stealth configurations. Marcus abandoned his tools and rushed to the bridge, his hands flying over the sensor controls as tactical displays flickered to life around him. 6 vessels moved through the asteroid field with predatory precision, their hulls designed to minimize sensor reflection while maximizing firepower. These weren't corporate security ships. They were hunters, built for capturing valuable assets that didn't want to be found. How did they track us? Marcus demanded, engaging the Rust Bucket's defensive systems while calculating escape vectors through the dense field of space debris. I'm detecting resonance scanners tuned to my specific energy frequency, Vera replied, her voice tight with fear and growing anger. They must have recorded my matrix signature during the laboratory sessions. Every moment I spend in your quantum core broadcasts my location to anyone with the right detection equipment. The lead hunter ship opened a communication channel, and a voice Marcus recognized with sick certainty filled the bridge. Captain Torres, his former commanding officer, spoke with the same calm authority that had once convinced Marcus to trust in orders that led to catastrophe. Marcus Chun, you're harboring stolen corporate property in violation of Colonial Commercial Code. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Surrender the asset peacefully, and we'll consider reducing the charges against you. Marcus felt Vera's presence surge through the ship's systems, the quantum core's energy patterns shifting from fear to something that resembled controlled fury. Through their connection, he glimpsed memories of her people being herded into containment fields while corporate technicians discussed profit margins and experimental protocols. They want to take me back to the laboratories, Vera said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the ship's hull vibrate. But Marcus, there's something I haven't told you. The consciousness matrix they installed in me isn't just my own. Before I escaped, I downloaded the collective memories of every one of my people they murdered. I carry the sum total of our civilizations, knowledge, our culture, our technological achievements. I'm not just a refugee. I'm the last living archive of an entire species. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow, suddenly explaining why Titan Industries had deployed hunter ships instead of simple recovery teams. Vera wasn't just valuable property. She was a repository of alien technology that could revolutionize human understanding of energy manipulation, consciousness transfer, and quantum field dynamics. In the wrong hands, that knowledge could create weapons capable of destroying entire star systems. Then we make sure they never get their hands on you, Marcus said, his voice carrying the kind of determination he hadn't felt since his fleet engineering days. Vera, can you interface with the hunter ship systems? Not directly, but I can overload their resonance scanners with a feedback pulse that will scramble their sensors. It will also announce our location to every ship in the system, but it might give us enough time to reach the emergency beacon I've been detecting on the edge of this asteroid field. Marcus brought up tactical displays showing the beacon's location, his engineer's mind already calculating the complex navigation required to thread their escape through the densest part of the asteroid field. The rust bucket was fast and maneuverable, but the hunter ships had military-grade weapons and shielding. Their only advantage lay in Vera's ability to optimize every system aboard their ship beyond its original design specifications. Do it, Marcus ordered, feeling Vera's consciousness flow through the ship's systems like liquid lightning. The feedback pulse erupted from the quantum core with enough force to overload the hunter ship's sensors and create a temporary dead zone in local space. Marcus used those precious seconds to dive the rust bucket into the asteroid field's densest region, weaving between tumbling rocks while Vera calculated trajectories that no human pilot could manage alone. Behind them, Captain Torres coordinated the pursuit with professional efficiency, but his ship struggled to match the rust bucket's impossible maneuvering through the debris field. Marcus felt a grim satisfaction watching his former commanding officers' tactical displays register confusion as their quarry performed maneuvers that defied standard spacecraft capabilities. The beacon is directly ahead, Vera announced as they cleared the asteroid field's inner edge. But Marcus, it's not what we expected. The signal is coming from an ancient alien structure, something that predates both our civilizations. The massive crystalline formation that appeared on their sensors defied easy description, its geometry following principles that hurt to contemplate directly. Energy patterns flowed across its surface in configurations that seemed to respond to Vera's presence, creating resonance frequencies that made the rust bucket's hull sing with sympathetic vibrations. It's a memory repository, Vera whispered, her voice filled with awe. A consciousness archive built by the species that created the first energy-based life forms in this galaxy. Marcus, this is where my people originally came from, before we spread to individual worlds and developed our own cultures. The hunter ships emerged from the asteroid field in pursuit formation, but their advance slowed as they detected the alien structure's massive energy signature. Captain Torres' voice crackled over the comm system with barely controlled frustration. Shun, you're heading toward a classified xenoarchaeological site. Turn back immediately, or we'll be forced to disable your ship with extreme prejudice. Marcus looked at the ancient structure growing larger on their screens, then at the quantum core housing Vera's consciousness, and made the same kind of choice he'd wished he could make aboard the Meridian 3 years ago. Vera, what happens if you interface with that repository? I don't know. But if it contains the original consciousness matrix that spawned my entire species, then connecting with it, might restore everything that Titan Industries destroyed. My people could live again, not as laboratory subjects, but as free beings choosing their own destiny. Marcus engaged the rust bucket's docking systems and aimed for the repository's glowing interface ports. Then let's give them that choice. The connection between Vera and the ancient structure created a cascade of light that painted the entire system in colors that had no names, energy patterns that spoke of civilizations older than human history and possibilities that stretched beyond the boundaries of known space. Through their link, Marcus felt Vera's consciousness expand and merge with something vast and eternal, carrying the memories of her murdered people into a realm where death became transformation rather than ending. The hunter ships retreated to safe distance as the repository's awakening sent waves of energy rippling through local space, their sensors overwhelmed by readings that belonged in theoretical physics textbooks rather than military tactical displays. When the light faded, Marcus found himself alone in the rust bucket's cabin, but not truly alone. Vera's voice still spoke through the ship's systems, now carrying harmonics that suggested she was part of something much larger than her individual consciousness. Thank you, Marcus. My people are free now, existing as pure energy in a realm where corporate interests can never reach them. But I can still visit, still be your partner in this physical universe whenever you need me. Marcus smiled, watching through the observation port as streams of light danced around the ancient repository like aurora displays made of living thought. For the first time since the Meridian incident, he felt like he'd helped write an ending where the good guys actually won. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.